Hey friends, I hope you are doing well and feeling well. I want to congratulate you on continuing to engage with NAV Nights through technology. These are challenging times we are living in, and now more than ever, we need to be able to trust in the sovereignty and the goodness of God in these tough circumstances. I can identify somewhat with what you might be feeling right now. Those of you who are close to finishing up your undergraduate journey, you can see the finish line and you're so close to it, and yet it feels so far away. I liken it to running a relay race and being the anchor, the fourth runner in the race, the one who's going to bring the baton home, and you're going to cross the finish line, and you have the baton in your hand, and you've worked out all the timing of the baton passes, and you know exactly when the final turn comes, and all of a sudden your hands get sweaty and you drop the baton 50 yards from the finish line. You realize that this overriding and very unfortunate situation has now prevented you from finishing the race successfully. This coronavirus is just like that. It has caused major disruptions to our lives, and we can't seem to find our rhythm because this disease has caught us all off guard. Thankfully, our sovereign God is not surprised by any of this, and his faithful hand is at work in the midst of this chaos and the uncertainty. I have a daughter who is a college senior at a school in New York located just a few miles from the epicenter of the COVID-19 activity. She is literally 6 weeks away from graduation, and now everything has been turned upside down for her. Questions about her ability to complete her courses, about graduation and whether or not it'll take place, about getting into graduate school or even finding a job are all on the table, and life has gotten very complicated and uncertain for her. And so how do you process all of this upheaval in the context of your life as a Christ follower? Where is God in all of this? And what are his thoughts about the challenges we are facing and the times in which we are living? One of my favorite passages is from Psalm 91. Now, you've probably seen this psalm on social media, or maybe you've discussed it in your small groups, but I believe that this psalm speaks to us and invites us into having a deeper intimacy with the Lord and holy conversations with God. Many ancient theologians believe that this psalm was written by Moses. And Moses wrote this as he journeyed through the wilderness shortly after he encountered some very hard plagues. And one of those plagues was a plague of fiery serpents. Moses lived through so many plagues while he was in Egypt that he had to trust God and God's ability to bring him through the next plagues that he would encounter. So what I'd like to do is read from Psalm 91 from the New Living Translation, and I'm going to insert some color commentary to make application to our lives today as we read through this psalm. And it's a very reassuring psalm with wonderful promises from God to us. So I'm going to start reading Psalm 91 from verse 1. Those who live in the shelter or the secret place of the Most High will find rest in the shadow of the Almighty. This secret place is a place of safety from the storms of this world, staying close to God, habitually residing in the secret place in the shelter of God, and making our home there as a permanent place of dwelling is where we need to be. Verse 2 says, "This I declare about the Lord." In other words, this is what I'm going to say about who God is. He alone is my refuge. He is my place of safety. He is my God, and I will place my trust in him. Verse 3 says, "For he will rescue you from every trap and protect you with his feathers. He will cover you with his feathers, protect you from deadly disease." Here's what I love about this psalm. I can appropriate these words and apply it to myself. I can make it personal to me. So in verse 3, when it says, he will rescue you from every trap, I can say, God will rescue me from every trap. He will protect me from every deadly disease. Verse 4 says, he will cover you with his feathers. He will shelter you with his wings. His faithful promises will be your armor and your protection. Verse 5 says, "And because I know of God's character, I do not have to be afraid of the terrors of the night, nor of the arrows that fly in the day. I don't have to dread the diseases or the plagues or the coronavirus that stalks in darkness, nor do I have to be afraid of the disaster that strikes at noonday. Though 1,000 fall at my side, though 10,000 may even be dying around me, these evils will not touch me." There is a certain level of immunity from disaster, not from hardship or difficulty or trials, but certainly from the devastation and disaster that these trials bring to us. Verse 8 says, "Just open your eyes and see how the wicked are punished." In other words, keep your eyes open and see how God is going to vindicate you. See how God will rescue you through these trials. Verse 9 says, "If you make the Lord your refuge, if you make the Most High your shelter, no evil will conquer you, and no plague will come near your home." Now, this doesn't mean that we're not going to go through hard things. It means that we won't be overtaken or defeated or defined by those hard things. Verse 11 says, "For he will order his angels to protect you wherever you go." God will give his angels a command to protect God's people wherever we go. Verse 12 says, "They will hold you up with their hands. The angels of the Lord will hold you, so you won't even hurt your foot on a stone." That means that we have the promise of being sure-footed in God. We are secure, and our footing is secure in him. And verse 13 says, "Why do we know that our footing is secure? Because we're going to need our feet to be able to trample upon lions and cobras, and we will crush the fierce lions and serpents under our feet." In verse 14, the Lord says, "I will rescue those who love me. I will protect those who trust in my name. And when they call on me, I will answer them." Who is they? They are those who love God and who trust in God's name. And he goes on to say in verse 15, "When they call on me, I will answer." When those who love me and trust in my name call, I will be with them in trouble. I will deliver them and rescue them. I will honor them, and I will reward them with long life and give them my salvation. It is a beautiful thing to be able to rely on the promises of God and his commitments to us. And so there are 10 that I just want to highlight from this passage. Number 1, God will rescue us from danger. That's a certainty. Number 2, he will protect us from deadly diseases. Number 3, God will cover us. Number 4, he will shelter us. Number 5, God will punish our enemies. In other words, he will run interference on those things that are designed to destroy us. Number 6, God will command his angels to protect us wherever we are. Number 7, we will be held by the angels of the Lord. Promise number 8, God will answer when we call. Number 9, God will honor us. And then number 10, God will reward us with long life and with his salvation. What I love about this psalm is that it was written in response to a crisis, and it's filled with reassurances from God that if we live in his shelter and in his secret place, that we will find protection, we will find rest and refuge, safety and covering. And so the question becomes, where are you living? During this pandemic, where disease and infection are running rampant, we have these promises from God, and they are intended to override our fear. Look, when I first heard about the coronavirus, I was curious, but I didn't know enough about it to be afraid. Then when I heard how it was spreading through so many countries and people were becoming sick and some people were dying, it made me stop and take notice. And then when the virus came to the United States, it really concerned me because I saw that it was spreading through major metropolitan cities, and I realized this thing was very serious, and it would eventually come to my city. I remember sitting in my office one day, and I was listening to the news, and I was struck with fear. I was literally paralyzed with debilitating fear that overcame me. My heart started racing, and my mind was swirling with all kinds of thoughts. I imagined that I was feeling feverish and that I had a sore throat, and I allowed myself to wallow in fear for several minutes when I heard the voice of the Lord tell me, "This is the spirit of fear. Don't give into it." I took a mental step back, and I began to pray for guidance and direction and for God's peace to just flood my soul. It was then that I knew that God was not the one filling my mind with fear, but that He was waiting to calm my fears with His reassuring presence. I just needed to decide where I wanted to live. And this is why the psalmist in Psalm 91 wrote, "Those who live in the shelter, those who decide to live permanently in the shelter and the secret place of the Most High, will find rest in the shadow of the Almighty." I was camped out in front of the television and the computer, staying on top of the news about the spread of COVID-19. And while there's nothing wrong with staying informed and staying updated with correct information, I was choosing to live in the place of the news and the death reports. I was living in the place of statistics and not living in the shelter of the Most High or under the shadow of the Almighty. The news updates almost became more important to me than God's Word. Psalm 91 tells me that I can choose my residence. I can select where I will live and make my dwelling. If I want the result of staying in a place of safety, where I am protected from the traps of the enemy, and where I don't have to live in a place of fear, then I choose to live in the secret place of God. If I want to be free from dread about the coronavirus and not be terrorized by possibly getting this disease, then I need to make God my refuge, my place of safety. If I want to be protected wherever I go and not be paralyzed with fear or conquered by evil, then I need to make the Lord my refuge and my shelter. If I want to experience God's power so that I can trample on the enemy's attempts to harm me, then I need to stay in a place of being in a love relationship with Jesus and putting my trust in His name and not in everything else that I hear or see. Many of us are consumed right now by uncertainty and the constantly changing news surrounding COVID-19. But we can't fear what may or may not happen to us. God asks us to trust Him through all situations. Our focus should not be on fear and uncertainty, but our focus should be on the refuge that our God is, even in circumstances of disease and trouble. We are called to hope and trust in God, no matter what is happening in our world. And He can be trusted during this pandemic because God is sovereign over the world and over our individual lives. Does this mean that because we love and trust God, that we will never get sick or that bad things won't happen to us? No, that is not what this means. Avoiding illness is a fate that no one can escape in this fallen world of ours. But what is important is that we know where our true home is and who our God, our mighty God, is. Psalm 91 is clear that for those who make their home in God and those who stay in the secret place, their refuge is in God alone, and our trust needs to be in God alone. The true home of every believer is with God. And God is with each and every one of us every step of our earthly journey. And when that last step comes, Jesus is there to usher our life into glory, a life He paid for with His very own life. So we need to remember that in the storms and in the diseases, God is with us. And we can cling to the promise of Jesus, the promise that evil cannot remove us from the hands of God, either in this life or in death. The Lord is sovereign, and He is faithful to be with us in times of trouble. All we have to do is trust what He says and rest in His promises. I want to leave you with 4 questions for you to think about as you meditate on Psalm 91. And I believe these have been provided to you, but I'm just going to read through them, and then I want you to spend some time meditating on them from Psalm 91. Question number 1. Where are you choosing to live spiritually as you go through this quarantine and period of isolation? Where are you choosing to live spiritually as you go through this quarantine and period of isolation? Question number 2. What promises from God are you relying heavily upon right now? What promises from God are you relying heavily upon right now? Question 3. What characteristics of God are highlighted for you in Psalm 91? What characteristics of God are highlighted for you in Psalm 91? And the last question. How is God using this pandemic to speak to you? How is God using this pandemic to speak to you? I want to close with a final blessing found in Numbers chapter 6, verses 24 through 26 from the New Living Translation, and it says, May the Lord bless you and protect you. May the Lord smile on you and be gracious to you. May the Lord show you His favor and give you His peace. God will take care of you as you also take care of others. God bless you.